Hello, everyone. All right. I'm hoping everyone can see me. Great, great. Okay. It's good to see everyone again. And I wanted to again say that if you missed the material from last week, take a look. Feel free to sign up for the exercises. What you have with the exercises are places where it's a site where you can hear recordings of certain prayers read very slowly, word for word, and then also read again at a more normal pace. So for those of you who are really focused on learning to really kind of pronounce and keep up with some of the central Hebrew prayers, hopefully you will find that useful. Then there's a short vocabulary list, a few words for the week, and a little bit of grammar review. So that is there and available and will be available. I will upload exercises within an hour of the end of this session. For those of you whom I've heard from the first week, it has been such a joy to hear different people's stories, to hear about all the different kind of places that we've all come from and why we're here together. I just want you to know that even if I have not been able to respond to you personally, I've very much been moved by the stories and your journeys, and please keep it coming. All right, so for today, week 2 of Hebrew for the High Holidays. What we are going to do is essentially cover 3 different things as we did last week. I want to talk a little bit about theology, so a little bit of interpretation with some of the prayers. We're going to do a little bit of grammar, and we're going to cover a little bit about pronunciation and different tools. And I'll try to address some of the questions that came up that I received this week. Now, we're going to do 2 different prayers today. First, the Shema, and then the very first paragraph of the Amidah. So why have I chosen these? I've chosen these again because, like last week, it does not matter what kind of community you pray in, what denomination or non-denominational. These are so central that you will find them pretty much in any Jewish service that is using even a little bit of traditional liturgy, unless of course it's all chanting, in which case this will be irrelevant. But hopefully this will be useful for you. So before we start looking at those, I received a bunch of questions about the vowel Schwa, which is those 2 dots that are kind of vertical, and about how to pronounce them, right? So some people are like, wait, I learned that was that's silent, or is it or is it or something like that. So I'm going to give a quick 5-minute introduction to what the Schwa is and how it's pronounced, and hopefully this will help a little. In order to do this, I am going to share a screen. I'll introduce this, and then I will come back to you. All right, so hopefully you can see my screen. And let me see if I can make it a little bit bigger for everyone. All right. No, I'm not going to make it bigger because then it just clicks. Okay, there we go. All right, here is the vowel we're talking about. 2 dots. They look like little squares. It's pixelated, but usually 2 little circles. And it's called a Schwa. Now, there are 2 kinds of Schwa. One is vocal. That's the one that makes the sound, a very, very short A sound. The closest I can approximate is something like about, okay, that sound. Then there is a completely silent schwa. They look the same, and so sometimes distinguishing between the two can be a little bit of a pain, but this one makes absolutely no sound at all. So how do you know how to tell the difference? Here are a few clues. This won't address absolutely everything, but this should get you pretty far. If the schwa is under the very first consonant, the very first letter of the word, and you have a schwa at the beginning, you're going to make a sound. Milachim. Milachim. It's going to be vocal. Another one that is vocal is when you see two in a row, the first is silent, the second one is vocal. So mish, silent, pechot, mish pechot, which means families. All right, so the second one will make the sound. Basically, what's going on in both of these is that these are starting off syllables. So me is the first syllable, and me, la, chim. Here, mish, this schwa is at the end of the syllable, so it's just silent, and then pechot. All right, I'm going to skip through some of this. This is a short piece, my daughter. All right, here we go. This is a screencast from one of the courses that I have on my website. So I just want to point out the most important things. There are 5 letters of the Hebrew alphabet that are guttural letters. The resh, the aleph, chet, ayin, and hey. Now, these 5, I'm a white Ashkenazi woman, so I cannot pronounce the gutturals the same way that a Sephardi Jew may be able to pronounce them, or someone coming from an Arabic background. But these, especially like the ayin, would be very, very deep in the throat, as would the chet. So these guttural letters, these 5 letters, hate schwas. All right, which means that if for some reason there's supposed to be a schwa, those 2 dots, those 2 vertical dots, under one of these letters, these 5 letters want to spit out the schwa, right? In other words, imagine trying to pronounce ayin and then from the schwa. It's just too much, right? There's just too much going on here, and you get a sore throat, all right? So instead of trying to go what you have are these vowels. Now, we often learn these to be separate vowels. These are the ones that look like the combination where you have a schwa and then another vowel. These are all called the name of the vowel, plus when the schwa is combined, they're called chataf. So chataf patach, chataf segol, chataf kamatz. The names don't really matter all that much. What's important to know about these is that functionally these three vowels are schwas. So the reason that they are combined with something else is simply to make pronunciation of the word a little easier. So again, let me just jump forward. All right, so for example, I'm just going to give you one example and then we'll move on to some prayers. If I have a word like this one, shemartem, from shamar, to observe, like shomer Shabbos, right? So shamar, when you add the tem at the end, it means y'all, or as I've recently learned, if you're from Pittsburgh, yins. So, shmartem. Now, what happens if I have a word that instead of a shin begins with a guttural letter? According to this pattern, I'm supposed to put a schwa under that guttural letter. And so I should have something like this. This is the same form, but amad is like the Amidah. Amad means to stand. So this can't be, because the ayin, again, will not tolerate this schwa. So what happens? A little added sound, right, is added on to help pronounce the word. So while I would say for the first one, shimartem, the second, I would say amaditem, because there's a guttural, and so you have to have a vowel sound to help say the word. But functionally, it really is a schwa that just needs a helping sound to it. All right, so I could say more about that, but that's probably enough and a good place to start with the vowel schwa and how to pronounce it. Again, the best place to begin is if you see a schwa at the very beginning of a word, it's going to make a sound. If you see two in a row, the second one will make a sound. Right? And that should get you pretty far along. And then eventually people just develop an instinct for it and it will come. Okay, so that's our piece for vowels. Now we are going to talk about the Shema. And many of you may be familiar with the Shema in a lot of communities. You know, if you know one prayer, it's the Shema. The main line of the Shema has 6 words. And each of those 6 words is pretty easy to translate. The words are not complicated. They are not rare. Each of those 6 words is very, very clear. However, when we put those 6 words together and really think about what they mean, then the Shema becomes a lot more difficult to really understand. Now, from my perspective, personally, this is not a problem. This is a good thing because it makes the Shema a little more mysterious. It enables us to understand the text in a wider range. So we'll look at that first line, and then we'll look at the first paragraph of the Shema. So again, I'm going to come back to my shared screening. And that's not the right one. So I'm going to stop sharing. And I am going to figure out how to, I'm sorry about this, one moment. Let me just close out the other one. All right, try this again one more time. Okay, here we go. All right, so Hebrew for the high holidays. Make this a little bit bigger for you. All right, so here is the text that we are looking at today. The first 6 words are pronounced as follows: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Then the line that comes right below that is pronounced aloud in most Reform congregations and in most of the other movements, Reconstructionists, Orthodox, different strands of Orthodoxy, conservative. You tend to just kind of mumble this in a very kind of low tone. And then we have the main paragraph. So I want to start by talking about these 6 words for a few minutes. Now, the first 2 words, Shema Yisrael. So the Shema is not taken from, was not created by the rabbis. The Shema is one of those fairly unusual examples where actual Torah text is brought into the liturgy. So, because this comes from the Bible, we know that Yisrael in the Bible only means the people of Yisrael, and it never refers to the land or territory. So, and the first word here comes from Shama, Shin Mem Ayin. Shama means to hear. So Shema is a command. Shema Yisrael, hear, O Israel. Now let me just say a quick word about Shema. In English, you may have an exchange as follows. Let's see. You're not listening to me. No, I hear you. So listen and hear mean 2 different things, right? Listen generally implies that you're not just physically taking in the vibrations of sound and processing it in your brain so that you hear sounds. It means that you are like taking in the information and doing something with it. In Hebrew, especially in biblical and classical Hebrew, all of the senses never imply simply the physical, like just seeing something. It's about seeing something that impacts on you and that's going to change the way that you are. So Shema Yisrael doesn't just mean hear, it's really more like listen, pay attention. Now, just another piece I'll drop, a conversation for another time. The book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, the 5th book of the Torah, loves the verb shama. It's all about hearing. While the 2nd book of Torah, Exodus, or in Hebrew, Shmot, uses the verb ra'ah, which means to see. So we could have an entire conversation about the theology of seeing things versus hearing things. Okay, now we're going to move on. Now, you might think Adonai Eloheinu. So again, if you look in a biblical, in a Torah scroll, instead of just Yud, you will have the full divine name written out, Yud, He, Vav, He. And as I said last week, different Sidurim have different customs. Some will put the 4 letters of the divine name in, and some abbreviate it to just Yud. So here we have Adonai Eloheinu, and then Adonai Echad. Now, in most prayer books, you'll find, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. Now, I want to point out why that is a little bit inaccurate or unlikely as the original intended meaning. All over the Bible, we get phrases like, the Lord our God brought us out of Egypt. The Lord our God has commanded us to this and that. Now, to just give you another kind of example, it's kind of like Shira, our committee chair, convened a meeting. Now, if you look at the structure here, Shira, it doesn't say Shira is our committee chair. It says Shira, and then in case you don't know what her role is, here's a little information about her. Our committee chair convened a meeting. And when we have in the Bible, Adonai Eloheinu, the vast majority of time, and I mean really the overwhelming number of times we have Adonai Eloheinu, it's used in this way. The Lord, our God, brought us out of Egypt. Okay, again, this appears hundreds of times in Tanakh. So when we encounter the following translation, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one," we are suddenly making Adonai Eloheinu into a short sentence, and we're adding "is" in here. Grammatically, we can do that. This is not incorrect with the grammar. But if you have hundreds of examples of Adonai Eloheinu, meaning, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one," then that is probably the more likely translation here. So it may be, and actually from perspective of its original biblical context, I think it's more likely that the Shema was saying, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Or Adonai, our God, Adonai is one. Kind of like, "Hear, O Israel, Sam our cantor, Sam is awesome," right? Or, "Hear, O Israel, Sam our cantor is awesome." If you're an English teacher and you see the first sentence in a high school paper, you might draw a little line kind of crossing through the second Sam and say, you don't need that. It's perfectly fine and enough to say, "Hear, O Israel, Sam, our cantor, is awesome." Why say Sam twice? So here is a possible resolution. It is possible that these 6 words actually indicate, "Hear, O Israel, Adonai, Yud-He Vav-He, our God is one Yud-He Vav-He." Again, "Hear, O Israel, Yud-He Vav-He, our God is one Yud-He Vav-He." So let me just get out of the PowerPoint for a minute. So what could this mean? If you think about people in ancient Jerusalem who were worshiping Yud-He Vav-He, and then folks deep in the south in Beersheba who were worshiping Yud-He Vav-He, and folks way up in the northern tribes worshiping Yud-He Vav-He, it's possible that localized customs began to develop and that people began to worship Yud-He Vav-He in slightly different ways. And whoever is writing this piece of Torah is saying, no, your Adonai is my Adonai, is her Adonai, is their Adonai, that we are all worshiping the same Adonai. Okay, that is my little piece of theology. Now we're going to run very, very quickly for about 20 minutes through a little bit of grammar. All right, and we'll leave a few minutes for questions. All right, my screen again. All right, moving on. So one of the things that I want you to notice as you look at this first paragraph, and as you're working to develop the skills to pronounce it correctly and to start understanding some of the pieces, last week we pointed out that the cha ending on nouns usually means your something. So here we have ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, your God, bechol levavcha, with all your heart, uvechol nafshecha, and with all your nefesh. You're usually translated as soul. So first of all, I just want you to note again how many examples of this suffix we have, and how now you know every time you see it, it's your something, even if you don't quite know the vocabulary and what that noun is yet. Let me point out a few other things. The word after ve'ahavta, eight, sometimes you'll see it spelled this way with the 2 dots. This is a tsere. Sometimes you'll see it spelled with 3 dots, segol, et. They both mean the same thing. They are variations that has to do with stress. I know we're feeling a lot of stress these days. When it's more stressful, it's ate. When there's a little less stress on the word, it's et. I'm glad to talk more about that at another time for the super nerds among us. Here's the important thing. You're going to see this particle, I'm not even going to call it a word, you're going to see et in a lot of places. It just so happens it doesn't appear this much in this paragraph, but otherwise you'll see it all over the place. The et does not have a meaning. We don't translate the word et. What et tells us is that whatever follows is the object of the sentence. Now, if in English I were to say, the ball hit the child, we know that it's the ball that is actually hitting the child. We know the child is been hit by the ball, and it's not that the child is hitting the ball because of the word order. Because in English, we place our subject first, right? The ball hit, then our verb, the child, our object. In biblical Hebrew and through into modern Hebrew, et is basically a little note saying whatever follows is the object. So we don't translate it, but it's just a little marker for us that whatever follows is the object, which means that it would be something like the ball hit et the child. And once you have that, then you could say et the child the ball hit. You don't have to rely so much on word order, because as soon as you see et in front of something, you know it's the object. So this is a word that you will encounter all over the place, and that is the function of this word. Also quickly, bechol levavcha, with all of your heart. In English, we think of heart as like the seat of emotion, right? To be brokenhearted. There's so many metaphors that use heart relative to emotion. In biblical literature, heart equals what we would say the mind. So livavcha, bechol livavcha, with all of your heart means with all of your will, with all of your intention. It's mind oriented. So the next word, uvechol nafshecha, and with all your soul, as it's generally translated. Nefesh comes from a Mesopotamian word, napishtu. They both have the same Hebrew or Semitic roots, nun, pe, shin. And in Akkadian, napishtu means throats. The seat, right? So remember the phrase, you know, I've got a frog in my throat. Nefesh is the seat of emotion. The throat is the seat of emotion. So you shall love Adonai, your God, with all of your livavcha, with all of your heart, but think mind, intention, kavanah, uvechol nafshecha, and with all of your soul, but think with your entire emotional being. Uvechol me'odecha. Me'od, no one knows what it really means here. Everywhere else, it's an adverb. It means much. So perhaps with all of your allness. Okay. The other thing that I want to point to, well, let me go back here, is this word here, chol. This is a few of those where we learn that the little thing that looks like a T under a consonant, which is called a kamatz, is pronounced ah. That is correct 95% of the time. In a few cases, it's pronounced o. Again, in another setting, we could talk about why, but this word is very, very common. You will see it all the time, and chol means all or every, whatever fits better into the translation. So bechol, be is with, bechol, with all your heart. Uvechol. U or ve means and with all your nefesh. Uvechol, and with all your muchness. So this is something that will be on the vocabulary list for this week, a very, very common term. All right, without overwhelming, I'm going to just say a few things about the first paragraph of the Shabbat Amidah. The Amidah is the prayer where everyone stands up, and often everyone starts together for a few paragraphs, and then people kind of go into their own kind of silent continuation of prayer or meditation. While there are variations between whether it's Shabbat or it's a holiday, whether it's morning or evening, weekday, the first paragraph pretty much stays stable. So I could not find an egalitarian version that I was able to cut and paste, although that's what I would generally use. And in most Sidurim, the four mothers are included with the four fathers, less so in Orthodox or kind of conservadox communities. They will tend often to stick with the original text. But what we have here is the very beginning of the Amidah, which begins Baruch Atah Adonai. So the blessing formula, Eloheinu ve'Elohei Avotenu. Ve'Elohei means God of. The God of Avotenu, of our Avot, our fathers, and then many people, including myself, add ve'imotenu, emote mothers. And then the forefathers are listed, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Ve'Elohei Yaakov. And then generally you add the four foremothers, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Ve'Elohei Leah. Leah usually comes, Rachel usually comes before Leah because she's the favored wife. I think personally Leah should come first because she is the first, the senior wife, and actually produces more children, but that's another conversation. All right, so what I want to point out here about grammar is the hey that often comes before nouns and adjectives, and hey means the. So English tends to use a lot of separate words, right? I can say, I love them. In English, I'm using 3 words. In Hebrew, a lot of different pieces are all smooshed together onto one word. So when you see a noun or an adjective that's preceded by a hey, it means the. So Ha'el Hagadol means the great God. Hagibor, Vahanora, these are all describing the God. Great, kind of like warrior, and the Hanora, and the awesome one. Again, you can scan through different prayers and look for ha in front of a noun or an adjective, and now you know that that means the. And then finally, the last piece that I want to show you for today is there is an ending that you will find on a lot of nouns that is im. So the e, chirik, and the yud, and a mem sofit. When you have im at the end of a word, it means it's a plural masculine noun. So even if you don't know what chesed means, you know that whatever's going on here, there are a bunch of them. Right? Here, tov, the adjective good. tovim. So whatever it is, it's a bunch, right? It's many. So again, whenever you see the im ending, you're dealing with a plural masculine noun. All right, final words here. We talked about the Shema. The Shema prayer always immediately precedes the Amidah. The Shema is not just the one line, and it's not just the paragraph that is often recited aloud or even sung, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, and on, but then usually the next few pages as well are part of the Shema. And the Shema will almost always lead directly into the Amidah when everyone rises and you recite that first paragraph and then continue on with more. And as I said before, the Amidah has a lot of variations, but the beginning about blessing the forefathers and foremothers, our ancestors, tends to be at the beginning of the Amidah. So what you'll find on the exercises, if you are interested, is again, recordings of that first paragraph of the Amidah and the Shema and the first paragraph of the Shema read very, very slowly and then read a little more quickly so you can practice becoming comfortable with the pronunciation. And then also a few of the key words that I think are the most important because they're very, very common. You'll see them all over the place. And then a few reminders about some of these little grammatical pointers and just some exercises asking you to identify, hey, where do I see something that might be a plural noun? Where do I see something that might indicate the something rather than just a something? So step by step, we're moving forward, adding little pieces each week. All right, I think I have thrown out enough in 40 minutes to keep people busy. Remember that this recording will be uploaded, and again, Julie will say a little bit more about that. So if you didn't take it all in, go and watch it as many times as you need to. Right? Watch, stop, think about it. This is one of the good things about using this kind of platform rather than a live lecture. You can actually review it. All right.
Time for a couple of questions.
Yes.
That came to the chat.
Great.
Okay, great. So the first question, when we were looking at chasadim tovim, chasadim hatovim, why does there need to be a hey on the adjective as well?
Okay, great question. Whenever a noun has the, whenever it's definite, right? So the box rather than a box, any adjective that is describing that noun also has to be definite, also needs hey. So ish tov means a good man. Ish, man, tov, good. If I want to say the good man, I'm going to say ha-ish, ha-tov. So the hey, you always, if you're going to have a hey on a noun, you've got to have it on all of your adjectives as well. Or if not, they have to be consistent.
Okay, great. And another question was, is there a grammatical rule to determine which syllable is stressed in spoken Hebrew?
Yeah, this is a little bit tougher. In general, a good place to begin is to assume that the stress is at the end. So if you think ve'ahavta et Adonai Eloheinu bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha. So most of the time things will end on the last syllable. There are patterns of words like melech, nefesh, where the stress is at the beginning. If you happen to read something that has Torah trope, the cantillation marks, Most of the time, cantillation marks are put on the stressed syllable. So if you have the Torah trope in your text, you can just look at where that marker is, and that will generally tell you the stressed syllable.
Okay, maybe one or two more.
Sure.
Do the repetitions of hey in Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, V'Hanorah have special meaning? Is there something more than simple definite article?
No, it's just that you have Ha'el, so the God, and then a series of adjectives. Adjectives will come after the noun, but you can like add as many as you want. They will all have to agree. And because El, God, is grammatically presented in the masculine, I'm not going to get into theology, but grammatically presented in the masculine, all of the adjectives will also be in the masculine form. Again, agreement across.